A Kultured Kast has been created for entertainment and educational purposes. The advice given are opinions of our host and not of medical advice. The podcast is not a substitute for direct, personalized, professional medical care and diagnosis. Exercises and dietary advice mentioned should be discussed with your physician or personal trainer to find out what is best for you. This episode of the Kultured Kast is brought to you by Sun Emporium with two great locations here in Barrie, Ontario. Look them up at sunemporium.ca. Hi guys, welcome back to a Kultured Kast. Do performance-enhancing drugs devalue competition, or do they actually enhance competition? And I think that's a very important question. We're going to title each episode AVB, and this episode is professional athletes taking PEDs v. the regular guy, the average guy in the gym. PEDs v. supplements. Are there good supplements, bad supplements? Are there good PEDs and bad PEDs? Welcome our special guest, Jake Caden. He's the supplement specialist at 24/7 Athletic Culture, self-proclaimed nerd, lover of cerebral board games, boyfriend, father of 4 canine kids, and has a brain far too big for his own cranium. I want to intro this episode with the fact that everyone wants professional athletes to take performance-enhancing drugs. And I truly believe this. I'm going to give you a list. The players do. The coaches do. The owners do. The sponsors do. But most of all, we do, the fans. And if you're sitting at home listening to this or watching it saying, oh, no, I don't want this, I'm righteous, wrong. Because where do you stand up at a baseball game and cheer the most? When it's a home run hit. Or when the guy lays out another guy in an NFL game. Or in a sprinting contest down on a Saturday night, the second Saturday in the Olympics. We're all screaming for Ben Johnson or Donovan Bailey. So in our way, at that moment when we're cheering, we don't care if they're natural. We don't. If anything, and I'll admit it, I want my guys juiced. Because I want to fucking win. At the end of the day, I want to win. Yeah. Okay, so my first leading question for our guests and the two panelists. What drives the average Joe to take a performance-enhancing drug? Is it a competitive advantage? Because obviously for the sports I just listed, it is. But then there's also the vanity aspect. So Jacob, I'll start with you. Why does the average person take it?
So if we want to start at like something we're all used to is the gym, right? Because there's multiple reasons for you to take performance-enhancing drugs. So let's just start off with like anabolic steroids, right? You're in the gym, you're a dude, you want to look big, you take anabolic steroids. It's the idea that you might have set yourself up for a goal. So let's say I want to be X size or X pounds at this X percentage of body fat by this amount of time. And they've looked at social media, they've looked on Instagram, and then they finally realized that I've set myself for a goal where the only actual possible way it's attainable is if I use performance-enhancing drugs.
Yeah.
So they'll have to change their plan, right? Say, I'm okay with being smaller, less lean, less big, and it actually taking me 3 times as long, or I can continue on my plan, do exactly what my friends are doing, and take anabolic drugs.
Well, I think we need to touch on the topic before we get to these gentlemen about what you and I spoke of a few days back. And I again will set professional athletes aside. We will talk about them later in the episode. But your average person that goes to the gym, that's not doing bodybuilding competition, that's not doing a fitness competition, who's not a professional model, who doesn't play competitive sports at elite level, are still taking performance-enhancing drugs.
Yes.
And I think it comes down to, and you and I touched on this in a conversation before, are you intrinsically motivated or are you extrinsically motivated? In that, can I bench 335 and inside go, yeah, all right, great. Or am I extrinsically motivated because I want to look in the mirror and hope that as many women are looking at me as possible? Do you understand the difference?
Yeah.
And that's where I want this conversation to go. Because in high school, it's more prevalent and as accessible as weed and alcohol.
Oh, God, yeah.
So it's getting out of hand.
It's all because of social media, though.
Right. It's 100%, Jeff. But it's, again, is it because of vanity?
Oh, for sure.
Is it because I need recognition that I look this way?
The thing that we've, like, women get it a lot in magazines that they have to look a certain way.
Yep.
But it's never talked about what guys have to see. So when you look at any men's health magazine, who's on the cover? Right. Shredded, muscular guys.
Yeah.
When you look at the top movie stars in Hollywood, who are they? The Rock, Chris Hemsworth, all these guys, right? So in order for these younger guys to reach that, they need to, or feel they need to, take steroids, right? Yeah. Just like those guys do.
Yeah.
And I think that's why they're driven, because nobody wants to be a puny human like Corey. We all want to be big, strong men.
Yeah. I also think that, people that are naive or maybe just not educated look at those people on the magazines and have no idea that they are on any PED, right? Like there are people all the time, like in the gym, who maybe point a guy out and they're like, that guy's not on anything, is he? And I'm like, yeah, he's probably drinking it out the bottle. You know what I mean? Like a lot of people just think that they just look like that because of Photoshop or they just work out a lot, but they don't really know that they're actually using a drug.
Yeah, and you touched on a topic about, literally it goes back to when I was a kid, peer pressure. You walk out of the gym and I happen to believe it's way more, there's much more pressure on a young female than there is a young man. I'm not discounting that there is. As a race, I think we look at those magazines and we go, whatever, pass the nuts. We don't care. But when you get into our business and you get into inside the walls of our gym, well, no, it does matter. And it doesn't matter that I'm not doing a competition next week, but I want to look like Jeff. Okay, what do I have to do? Well, you have to eat clean and you have to, this is your work. Yeah, but what do I have to do? That's the mentality. And my lead-in next question is that bad? Is that any different than other physical augmenting surgeries like breast augmentation, gastric bypass, skin, facial lifts? What's the difference? It's all for vanity.
Well, I wanted to touch base on that because you have this idea. So let's take kids learning about like what's the ideal body type. So if you have a girl looking at a Barbie, right? And they see that, okay, she's like somewhat slim, but she has big breasts, right? Like that's what a Barbie looks like. So they say, okay, like I'll make sure I'm slim and then I'll get breast augmentation, right? We don't have an issue with that. Like literally no one has an issue with that. Oh, that's totally fine. You can do whatever you want. It's your body, your choice. But when a man looks at He-Man, they're playing with G.I. Joe and He-Man, and they've gone through the numbers. It's something ridiculous. Like your average G.I. Joe doll has like a 27-inch waist and then like a 52-inch broad shoulders. Like
we know he's benching 315.
Yeah, you know he's benching
for
315
reps.
For reps. The average like male character doll is larger than any Olympia competitor, like by dimensions.
Okay, but I'm going to interrupt. That's not why guys are taking performance-enhancing drugs in a gym. I believe that's why young ladies lead to eating disorders, because of the pressure put on them by society. I think, and it's not, and having lived it myself with my family, it is a perceived concept of look this way or you will not be accepted by society for females. For men, we're just, I want to look that way. How do I get that way? It's, to me, this is open for debate, I think there's much more societal pressure put on a young girl that you have to look this way or you will not be accepted, where a guy wants to look that way because, hey, I want to get the babes. It's nothing to do with the society pressure.
I think it's on the person, because I looked at wrestlers and those action figures being like, because I got picked on.
Yep.
I got picked on for being puny. Sorry, that's why I pick on you. And like I had chicken legs and girls would, my buddies had a little bit of muscle and they'd say that he was good looking and I was like, that cute kid, so for me, and then I got jumped a few times. So I felt that I had to be bigger and stronger and look a certain way in order to be seen as not as a weak person.
Yeah.
And to be seen as a good looking dude.
Okay. You just made my point.
Yeah.
You just made my point for me. It's not society that has funneled you into you have to look this way. It's you funneled yourself into that way.
But without the societal pressures of being picked on, without the social media, or back when I was a kid, wrestling, huge guys. The top actors have always
your
been,
ideals,
right? Your ideals. And if you look at the top 100 sexiest men of all time, aside from Paul Rudd, they are all jacked human beings, right?
Yeah.
So,
and for some reason, people think that they're not. It's only the bodybuilders and the pro athletes that are.
Well, I'll kind of interject on what Jeff said. The idea, you might have like let's say a regular person, and they say, oh, like you don't need to look like Ian Valeri. You know what I mean? Like absolute mass monster. They'll say, just be like, like jacked, beach ready, like Steve Cook. Steve Cook's been on gear for 15 years.
Yeah.
But they're saying, no, just look like him. Like they're saying,
They're downplaying it.
yeah, they're saying, just look like him. When now the bar to meet the minimum standard
is so high.
Is to literally you have to be
Or
on
even
gear
The Rock,
for years.
Chris Hemsworth.
And watch what your diet, like work out for a decade.
Yeah.
And that's the bare minimum to be like, for someone to say, well, he works out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
When I very first became a personal trainer, I was a personal trainer for about a year. I had lots of clients, business was good, and my boss said to me, he pulled me aside in his office.
I know where this is going.
He pulled me aside in his office and he said, Corey, he goes, you are a great trainer. He goes, you are good with people. He goes, but you don't look like a trainer. And he points out the window. He says, he looks like a trainer. And that is the first time that I experimented with PEDs. And I had no plans on trying anything, right? I was fine with the way I looked. I didn't think I needed to get bigger muscles for women or anything like that. I was athletic. I was happy. But he said, you're a great trainer, but you do not look like one. And he said, this is what I think you should do.
That's interesting. My first, and we'll go way back because I'm the old man, but my first exposure, I was older than you. Oh, actually younger, but not when you guys were exposed. In that I, throughout my high school athletic career, nobody in my school, to the best of my knowledge, was taking PEDs. And then one of the first practices, I was playing rugby at McMaster, and we shared the clubhouse with the football team. So the athletics room was in the middle. One side was rugby, one side was football for change rooms. So I come walking into the athletic room, and there's one of the football players bent over, and one of the team doctors was giving a needle and last. I walk, what the hell's that? And like, really? Like, you don't know what this is? And whatever it was back then. And I'm like, oh my God, like I've read about this. Yeah. Right? And I just turned around and walked back out, and I'm
Seen
like,
it in the
guys, did you
movies.
know? And they're all like, yeah, like we know. But I was so a level of naivety that I didn't have a clue. And never again was I exposed to that until the story I told in the last episode when I was done doing marathons and triathlons and wanted to get into bodybuilding. I took off my shirt and the trainer went, ugh. And he goes, you have 18 months. And by the way, do you have a couple $1,000s because we're going to put you on test?
Yeah.
And my mentality was, okay.
No.
If that's what's going to take, okay.
Yeah.
Like again, competitiveness. It wasn't a desire that I wanted to look. It's the fact that my mentality of training for a marathon was, well, I had to cross the finish line at the end of it, or all the last 2 years was a waste of time. And now my mentality was, okay, you're telling me 18 months, I've got to do this, no alcohol, this, and gear. Okay.
See, so for me, I didn't touch any. I started at the gym, and then about 5 years into working out was when I first experimented. I did a natural show. Naturally, I lost to guys who weren't natural.
That's a farce.
And that's where I threw in the towel with competing, because it was just like, how am I supposed to beat guys who aren't natural?
Yeah, you're like, what's the
back
point?
that goes back to the last episode when you were talking about the Olympics should have an open and a natural. And I balked at you because my mentality is none of them are natural. Mm-hmm. So just open it up.
But so the bottom three of my category were natural.
Yeah. And even then, people would have looked at you and went, yeah, whatever.
Right. And I had people in the gym say, what are you taking? And then it wasn't until I ended up working with one of my clients, and he's done it before. And he was like, hey, man, like, why don't we do it together? Like, why don't you, like, you've plateaued. You've reached I started at 160, I got to 200. And I couldn't get past this. And I changed up my training style. I changed up my diet. I couldn't figure it out. So then I jumped on test.
But like when you went from like 160 to 200, like at that point you weren't that scrawny kid that was, being made fun of anymore.
He had a base.
So was the only reason for you wanting to get even bigger to compete?
To compete, yes.
So if you didn't have
I
any
wanted to
interest
get
in
back
compete,
on that stage and redeem my loss. I've never done sports as a kid, right? Like my family, we weren't well off enough to put me in sports. And then with addiction, it didn't really support sports. And I wanted to win a fucking medal. Like I wanted some type of trophy to be like, I did that, And I felt like I was close with my first competition, but then standing up against those guys, I realized I wasn't.
Yeah.
So then the plan was, once I'm like, okay, let's do this. The plan was always to compete, because without that, like what is the point in doing that to your body?
Yeah, I agree. So I want to give the listeners and the viewers a little background. Performance-enhancing drugs aren't new. Thousands of years. So the ancient Greeks used to use wine and herbs to gain for advantage for the Olympics. They used to eat animal hearts and testicles because they felt it empowered them to be as strong as that animal. The Roman gladiators ingested stimulants to make them run and boost their energy and run faster. It wasn't until early in the 1900s that we started testing. 1928 was the first time that we tested. So people think, oh, that's a long time ago. Yeah, it is. What the hell were they doing back then? Like, what were they testing for? Believe it or not, the drugs of choice back then were a mixture of heroin, cocaine, and other stimulant ingredients. Yeah. It boggles my mind. Like I'm
There's
like,
no
what?
way back in the day when I was smoking crack was I like, I'm going to run a fucking marathon and win this gold medal. It was like, I'm going to run to the next pipe.
We all have
hit.
different goals there, pal. We all have different goals.
Well, even just the term PEDs. So when people talk about it, they say, well, you should never do PEDs. And then you say, because the definition is performance enhancing drugs. The two most researched performance enhancing drugs are caffeine and creatine. So are you going to say don't do performance enhancing drugs? And then they switch, well, you should never do banned performance enhancing drugs.
Yeah.
And I would say, okay, that's marijuana, that's ephedrine, that's cortisone shots.
There are UFC fighters who have been banned from competition for 5 years because they tested positive for pot.
Yeah.
Well, who was that runner? Was it a year ago or a couple years ago? She smoked weed because didn't her mom died?
Yeah.
And I'm
And
just
she couldn't
thinking,
go to the Olympics, and she was by far the fastest.
but I'm just thinking, I was like, weed did not enhance her performance. If anything, it's making her half asleep.
Yeah.
Well, it's just because it's a banned substance.
We
Jacob
draw an arbitrary line in the sand.
Yeah.
And everyone says, okay, sounds good.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah. Okay, let me tell you a couple of things. I couldn't find stats on the Winter Olympics. What are the 5 highest positive testing sports in the Summer Olympics?
I would say
Running.
track. Yeah.
Not even in the top 5.
Swimming.
Not even in the top 5.
Sorry, what sport?
Jeff's trying to think, like, what else is there?
Cycling, number 1.
Yeah.
Tested sport where the athletes test positive.
Oh, yeah. Lance Armstrong.
Yeah,
That was Jeff's
one
next
nut.
next
True
guess.
enough. Weightlifting.
That makes sense.
Kind of a good. Boxing, okay. Triathlon, number 4.
I think that makes sense to me.
100% to me. Now, why? I know why, but tell our listeners and viewers why. Why do you believe triathlon that they test high? Like, what are they taking? What's a triathlete taking?
Well, a lot of theirs is like banned methods. So like blood doping. So the idea of like taking blood out of their body, hyperoxygenating it, and then putting it back in their body is considered blood doping, which is a banned method under WADA.
Yeah.
So they get caught for that all the time.
Yeah. And that's what Lance Armstrong was.
That's what
correct?
Lance Armstrong did.
Well, didn't he do growth hormone too?
He did growth hormone, but the main reason why he was
was
banned
blood
was
doping.
blood doping.
Yeah.
And that is the idea of just
I saw him speak live at a nurse convention in San Francisco about 20 years ago, and he was outstanding speaker.
Oh, he has a documentary out.
Right? The reason he was demonized so badly is because he wasn't likable.
Yeah.
He was an arrogant prick.
Oh, God, yeah.
And he would say, hey, listen, you should have seen when I was taking the years they didn't catch
Yeah,
me.
well, that's what he said in the documentary.
Right.
But the best part is he wasn't likable, but he would still go to children's hospitals because he was diagnosed with cancer himself and beat it.
Yeah.
And he would still spend time with all those kids.
Yeah.
So while he was not liked mainstream, behind the scenes, he was very well liked.
And not only that, I'll go back to my analogy for Ben Johnson. Don't tell me he was the only cyclist in that Tour de France in those 7 years that wasn't blood doping.
Yep.
He just got caught.
Yep.
Ben Johnson was an idiot. He took a drink of a water bottle that someone placed beside him. You see it in the video,
Yep.
right? But he's not the only one, and nor was Lance Armstrong. But he was vilified and demonized,
Yes.
and put out as this anti-Messiah because he wasn't likable.
Yep.
It's as simple as that. Everyone was doing it. They just didn't want him to do it. What drug in the NHL is reported by Sports Illustrated that 1 in 5, 20% of the athletes take it, and not only that, they take it in game.
Ephedrine.
Yeah.
I got it right.
Sudafed. Sudafed is the number 1. And then of course there's many stories out about the big tough guys taking steroids because again, like go back to your MMA or boxing, you need to be bigger, stronger, faster to beat the crap of the other guy.
Now,
So George Larocque, let me just finish this one.
Yeah.
George Larocque wrote a book and he said, it's not just the tough guys. And I'll quote his book. He says, just look at the skilled players that have an efficiency loss and an equal weight loss every 4 years when the Winter Olympics roll around. And you'll see that everyone's on it. Yeah. He won't name names, but he's saying, hey, it's not just the big tough guys that are on steroids.
Me and Jake had a conversation about this yesterday.
Did you? About
About that exact thing that you just said,
Yeah. And, so I was just going to say the idea, we have this mob mentality when it comes to
Really? You're falling off, Corey.
banned substances.
Yeah.
So we have obviously NHL, if you said big tough guys on steroids, they say, oh yeah, like get them out of here. You know, bad, like that's bad for the sport. But then if you have all these skilled players taking stimulants in game, you know what I mean? And then come up from the bench. But for some reason, everyone goes, well, like everyone's doing that, you know, it's fine. Yeah. Same with the idea where you have Lance Armstrong, blood doping. So the idea, obviously we talked about it. I said it again if you guys want to drink water.
Oh, yes, you did. That's right.
Taking blood out, hyperoxygenating, putting the blood back in. They can cycle harder, longer, faster, but the next day, one, they don't test positive, and two, they have no benefits. They are a regular human being.
It's gone.
It's gone.
It's just
gone. Yeah. But then you have anyone in the MLB who takes muscle building, anabolic steroids. They get banned for a year. They say, you come back. Next season, come on back because you hit fucking dingers. Yeah. We want you here.
You sell tickets.
You sell tickets. We want you here. So come
merchandise.
back. You've probably been doing gear all fucking off season while you were banned.
Yeah.
You're just as big as when you left.
Yeah.
And everyone goes, yeah, that's okay.
Yeah.
But for some reason, 10 years later, they're saying Lance Armstrong, no, he can never cycle again.
Yeah.
Why?
Well, just like MMA fighters, like TJ Dillashaw he tested positive for some endurance. I think it was Enduraball or something.
Okay.
And he was banned for like 2 years. He came back to a title fight.
Right away.
Right away. Yeah. Same with John Jones. His is a little different. It's like a very small from a tainted supplement. But he came back, title fight, suspended, title fight, suspended, title fight.
It's all money. And that goes back to my original point that don't think I'll add promoters to that list of everybody wants the stars on PEDs because it sells tickets, it wins championships. You just touched on it sells merchandise. Little Johnny and little Susie in the audience at an NFL game, they don't have the punter's jersey on. I'll guarantee you, they don't. They have the biggest, meanest, fastest guy's jersey out there, or the quarterback that throws the most touchdowns, right? Yep. We, collective, as a fan base, are just as guilty as the athletes for taking PEDs because we force them to do it.
And the best part of it, and me and Jake talked about this yesterday too, and which I'm sure he'll talk about. The best part is the 90-day random drug test.
Oh, yeah. It's hilarious.
Right?
Yeah, the idea if you give someone 90 days notice for a random drug test, you are saying, please do steroids, but just the ones that can get cleared up in 90 days.
Yeah, exactly.
You are not telling them not to do steroids.
Yeah.
You can't convince me that the person who put in the rule for a 90-day notice for a random drug test is not telling the players that they cannot do drugs, right? We'd all agree that if that person didn't want them to do drugs, they'd say it's a random drug test that day.
Today.
Yes, today and now. The only reason they'd put 90 days notice is if they want you to do drugs.
Yeah, that's right. And then
I
I'm going
think
to go back to...
UFC is different, though. With USADA, it's not a random 90-day, it's random.
No, yes, there are different sports,
I'm going to tell you the different
why
rules
don't
in some
they just allow
associations.
it?
Because
Go back to my point. Just make it all legal.
Yeah, but
They're
why
gonna
aren't
do it.
they?
They're going to do it. Because they have to have a perceived rules that don't say little Johnny wants to do it now because he wants to look like Jeff, let's say.
So they think that
The health
if
risks
you allow PEDs,
and the
that you're going
influence.
to have people look at the
Oh,
sport
but
in
hold
a
on,
totally
Jeff.
different light.
They don't give a flying fuck about health risks.
But
They don't.
they want the public
They
to
want
see.
the perception that they care.
Yeah.
Listen, 5 minutes after that kid had a cardiac arrest on the field last week, the NFL was calling saying, get the teams ready, we're going back to the field. And both coaches said, fuck you, our teams aren't playing. The NFL didn't care. The ambulance wasn't even off the field and they were telling the teams to warm up. It's all about this.
They want to have their cake and eat it too.
Yeah.
Because they could set it up in two ways. They could set it up where, like we said, there's no 90-day notice. There's drug tests, they follow the rules. There's very easy ways to make sure, to the most extent, that they're actually clean. Everyone on the field is playing the same way. Then you have the total opposite end where they say, it's open, right? We can do drugs. Maybe they'll monitor for safety, right? Making sure that everyone who's playing...
Which is what it should be.
Should be, but they're not doing that. What they're doing is this middle ground, which it's the best for them because they can have people hitting dingers, the draw, and then they can also have the idea where they can have sponsors, the public figure thinks like, oh, okay, no drugs, whatever. But because they have both, now they're causing these people to say, for you to be competitive, you're going to need to do drugs. But we're going to have you this weird window where you're probably going to have to take mostly oral steroids. They're bad for your system, right? It's not as clean, and you're going to have to do it extra dangerously. But that's your only option.
And again, go back to the original point that I'm not saying fans are at fault.
No.
But fans are the ones buying the tickets. We're the ones tuning in for the TV. We're the ones actually buying the products that the sponsors are paying the TVs for and the products that they're sponsoring the athletes for. So when I'm a sponsor and Athletic Culture sponsors Jeff, the MMA fighter, and I'm like, Jeff, you better fucking win. And your bonus is going to be this if you win. And oh, by the way, you got to take that? Yeah, take it.
Yeah.
No.
Because guess what? Little Johnny's going to buy that shirt you're wearing. They don't care about the athlete.
No.
The athletes they're not cared about in the list of people that including the fans.
For every athlete, there's a line of athletes willing to do it.
Oh my God, that's a great point.
You know?
Oh my God, yeah. Like don't twist your ankle. You see guys walk off the NFL all the time and they're literally will avoid the head coach to go away. And do you think the head coach gives him the time of day? And the head coach is going, okay, hold on, I got John, I got Todd, I got Jacob in behind. That's who's up next. He doesn't care that you're hurt in the blue tent.
Yeah.
Doesn't care, right? And NFL is one of the worst sports for it.
So you think like that ideally PEDs would be allowed in the NFL, NBA, NHL?
I think it should be allowed at every elite level because they're doing it anyways.
Okay.
To get them to do it safely, monitor it. That's my mentality.
Right.
Because if you even look at bodybuilding, right? That's the fitness industry's big sport. Would it be fun and interesting if they were all natural?
Well,
There'd be no, outside of Ronnie Coleman, the guy who makes it to the stage natural.
Yeah,
But
right.
then the second he starts taking, he wins 7,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
they have the Natural Olympia show.
Yeah. How much do they make?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. They don't make any money, and
There's
it's a
no
yawner on a
pay-per-views.
Tuesday afternoon. It's not the Wednesday night promo show.
Every person watching has the opportunity to go to that show. They choose not to.
No one's going.
All right. So I've been given the green light. So let's do a couple of things. I'll just tell you, or I'll ask, what association, and to their credit, the PA has signed off on this, you get 4 random tests in season, and they actually have the right to test you twice off season. Because you were talking about how they gear up off season, and then 90 days before training camp, go, oh, I'm clean. The NBA is actually, as a player in the NBA, you are exposed to being randomly tested twice in the off season. They don't give a shit about performance-enhancing drugs. They're checking for marijuana. The number one suspension in the NFL, it isn't pseudoephedrine, it isn't GH, and it isn't steroids, it's marijuana. So again, it's all the perception of what the kids are looking at. If you test positive an NFL player for steroids, they're like, shh, go away. But you smoked a joint? Oh, we can't have little Johnny know that you did that.
Josh Gordon has been suspended from the NFL how many times? Right. He's been to the CFL. Now he's going to the XFL.
Yeah.
But he has been in and out of, and every single time that he gets suspended is because of marijuana.
Okay, so what we've talked about so far, and I'm going to lead into our next episode with these next few topics. We've talked about PEDs, steroids, stimulants, blood doping as a competitive advantage for pro athletes and or even average Joes in the gym. What about the PEDs for weight loss? Because I happen to think they're as equally dangerous as the ones that are for mass building muscles. So I'm going to talk about ephedrine, hydroxycut, and then there's your natural green tea and coffee extract, plain old caffeine. We touched on it last episode. Do we cut that out? What are your thoughts, being the special guest for this, about hydroxycut and ephedrine? Because ephedrine, in my mind, when I did that first show, I'd get a bottle of 25 milligram tablets and I'd take it like chewing candy.
Yep.
Now you can only get 5 milligram tablets.
Yeah.
I take 2 of those and I'm literally painting the ceiling in my bedroom at 2 a.m.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't
So
sleep for 8 hours.
what's your mentality when it comes to PEDs for weight loss?
I'm also going to specify again, PEDs is a broad spectrum, right?
Yes, it is,
Are we
100%.
talking about a low dose caffeine, or are we talking about you injecting tren, right? Those two things are very different. So I think obviously there's safer ways to go about it, there's less safe ways to go about it, and also dosage is the poison, right?
Yeah.
If you're going to use caffeine to help with even just appetite suppressant, right? That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that, unless you're taking 2,000 milligrams of caffeine a day.
Right.
Then it's very bad for you.
Okay. All right. So my last exit questions leading into episode 4. Should people set New Year's resolutions around physical health and weight loss? Second question is, what is the advice you would give someone that is entering into January and their sole purpose is to lose weight? And we'll talk about that in the next episode. This episode of the Kultured Kast is brought to you by Sun Emporium with 2 great locations here in Barrie, Ontario. Look them up at sunemporium.ca.